Yeah, I just wanted to say to you, we've been over the top on the abortion pill thing, because when we saw that it was going to be licensed here, 2015 it was licensed, and it actually began in operation in Ontario 2017 on my birthday, if you can believe it, August the 10th. And I said to the board, you know, we really have to try and get ahead of it. So what we did is created this abortionpillreversal.ca website, and did loads of research, and we had it checked by physicians to make sure that we were on the right track, that there was nothing in there that wasn't scientifically correct. And it was just amazing how it got attacked. It got just totally attacked. But anyway, so I'm just going to deal with this, the deception, the numbers. And this is what it feels like, to be honest with you. Being in the pro-life movement, this is exactly what it feels like. I haven't got a hat or a beard, but it just feels like that. So here was sort of the beginning of all of this. We created a little booklet that's actually on the table. And then I found this Dr. Germaine Greer quote, and I mean, she's not really a friend of ours, but this is what she's talking about, the abortion pill. These are violently active chemicals, and they have violent reactions on the organism. What is the situation in which a woman would undergo that kind of assault? And I mean, that's exactly how we felt, which is why we had this amazing website, and we put it together. We offered to everybody what the pill, how the pill works, what it does, and then offered a referral number to the medical team that's run by Heartbeat International now. What we did is we bought a forwarding line that was Canadian, so people could see that. But before I go into this, you may or may not have heard that the doctors that were trying to fight against the FDA with loosening all of their guidelines regarding mifetromeso, that's what it's here. It is here. That whole abortion, chemical abortion procedure. They were told by the Supreme Court unanimously that they had no standing to make their case. Now, don't be, you know, again, don't be down about that. They didn't say what they were saying wasn't correct, that the FDA didn't take time, didn't research, shouldn't have taken all the guidelines. Basically, all they said was that they were not involved in the provision of chemical abortion or medical abortion. They made no money out of it. They wouldn't be prepared to give it to their patients. So really there was no standing for them to make any comments at all. So it's a procedural thing. So they will come back. We know they will come back. But nevertheless, it's a bit of a shock, I think. But the other side think we're all going to go weeping home and stay quiet and not doing anything.
Jackie,
yes?
One other thing that came out of that, though, is that, as I was listening to some of the analysis, was that one of the concessions to get that done was that it gave greater protections to the physicians in the United States based on conscience rights, something we really don't have here.
No, that's true too. Yeah, thank you. So just for those of you, I'm using some of these pieces because we have sort of resorted in the end to try and get the message out to our members and to the public at large, because we have all the MPs in Canada on a MailChimp list, and we have all the MPPs in Ontario on a MailChimp list. So monthly we send out what we call a grassroots MailChimp regarding the abortion pill, because Facebook took us down. Google wouldn't have our ads on anymore, even though they're factual. So here is from a Finnish study. It is a little pill that kills. And actually, we believe women ought to be told that if you have a choice, I mean, we don't want either of them, but if you have a choice between surgical abortion and medical abortion, if you don't really care that your baby is gone, think about yourself. And actually a surgical abortion is safer for you than medical, because the medical one has 4 times higher rates of those high adverse events, which are infection, or the baby's pieces are still left in, and hemorrhage. So why would you choose the medical abortion that can hurt you more? Does everybody understand how the pill works? I mean, we don't know? Okay, well, it's almost very simple, but because it's so horrid. But when a woman is newly pregnant, her body makes a lot of estrogen, but also progesterone, which supports growth of the little embryo, the placenta, and everything that the pregnancy will then need to go forward in a healthy manner. So what some doctors have found is that if you use mifepristone, it's like Dr. Lyle told us last year. You remember musical chairs? If you can think that the chair that you're sitting on, and there's a load of people competing for that chair, usually in pregnancy, they're all progesterone. So they're all running around and somebody gets the chair and plugs in, and the progesterone is put into all the cells and the pregnancy is supported. What happens when they put mifepristone in is that it's like a chameleon. It actually can shape itself into the site that the progesterone would normally be. So when the progesterone finally gets there to get in, it finds that it's blocked. So the placenta begins to decay, the little one is starved of any food, fluid, all of that nutrition that it has. And then 2 days later, they're given misoprostol, which is a prostaglandin, which puts the mother into labor. So the dead or dying baby is then washed out of mum's body. It's told to the mothers as though it's going to be something very simple, but we know very different, the pain and the bleeding and the horror of medical abortion. So, you know, it's just something that happens within a couple of days. It can take, women can bleed for up to, I think, 15 days is one of the times I've heard. There are different days. But the fact is, women are not prepared for what they're going to face. The baby always dies. And as I say, you know, in the Finnish study, and again, it's a study that looked at, it's what we don't have here in Canada. Dr. Reardon mentioned it earlier. The country itself actually has a system where every woman that has had an abortion, they know who it is, they know what's happened, they know the pregnancy, if she's pregnant, they know the pregnancy outcome. And so they looked at 45,000 women, half of which had medical abortions, half of which had what they call procedural abortions or surgical abortions. And this is where the 4 times rate of higher adverse events in those 3 areas that I said came from. And in Toronto there was a study also done just a couple of years ago, and they found a 2 times rate, like there are higher things. So even in our own country, statistically, it's not as good for women, if you want to say it this way, for women to undergo a medical abortion. So we thought, well, we're going to try and preempt some of this, put this website up and see where it goes, which is what we did. And then what we're hearing, this is sort of all part of the deception. Women are not told how difficult it's going to be for them afterwards. They're not told the higher rates. And also, we've got, now this again is from the States because our country can't be bothered to do any research. That women are told if anything happens and you are bleeding past a certain date or with a certain huge clots, get yourself to the ER, but don't tell them that you've had an abortion. Tell them you've had a miscarriage. And so there are studies, and this is the result of one of those studies, that miscoding the abortion pill related complications as natural miscarriage makes women twice as likely to be admitted for surgery and at greater risk of multiple hospital admissions. Because they're just told to say that, so then the ER folks will just think she's having a miscarriage, right? It's a whole different thing to an induced abortion. And the chemical abortion pill can be deadly. We have a young one dead here in Canada on July the 4th, 2022, 19 years old. And I guess I ought to go to it. Did I have it? Here it is. Her number is 00010100083. That's how she will be forever remembered in the adverse events of the Ministry of Health. So when I followed up with this about her death, I followed up to see if there's anything different done when somebody dies from this, because the list of, horrendous things that women undergo. This young one died of septic shock. If you go to those adverse events, I mean, it's just unbelievable some of the things these women go through. But this young woman, anyway, apparently I was told that because in the monograph of the drug procedure, mifepristone, it says death can occur but is rare. They would have presumed that she would have read that and accepted that risk. Now, if you go on, if you ever are interested to look at, you just have to Google mifepristone monograph, and you'll come up with about 40 pages of things. And I think it's on page 16 or page 9 to 11 and 15 and 16 that they actually mention that. Now, really, are we to believe that every young woman and every woman that takes or gets an abortion pill actually goes to that monograph and reads that? But apparently that's the reason why they won't do anything about it, because it was something that was told to women that would happen. And I mean, we talk about misinformation. I don't know if you remember, but a couple of years ago, it may have been early last year, April I think, Angus Reid did a series of polls about Canadians and pro-life. We found out then that 2/3 of them don't believe that life begins until like the second trimester, right? They just don't think there's any human life there at all. But can you wonder when you've got Angus Reid actually said that 15 weeks gestation is about when a fetus develops a heartbeat. I don't know if any of you know any science, but the latest science says it could be 15 days after fertilization. It's at least sort of around about 21, so mummy would be 5 weeks pregnant, baby is 3 weeks old. But 15 weeks, how are you supposed to make any sort of decision? You might be glad to know that actually in the series of polls, Canadians still believe that even though you held pro-life values, you could still stand for public office. Just thought I might please some of you about that. Some of the other pieces that we're hearing from mums is that, you know, this is not her, but she's a real young mum that's had an abortion at home, and she can't stay there now because she said it's a place where I killed my baby. That's what's in my head, right? I can't stay. And if you look, again, the way she ends up, most of these women end up on their own, on the toilet or in the bath, losing their babies, bloods, clots and everything. And we also know, and again Dr. Reardon is so amazing with the research, if you've never been to the unchoice.org, please go to it. If you've never been to afterabortion.org, please go. Because there's so much information for us to stand up and present that says abortion is not good for women. And this is a little piece from our, the latest statistics are this extra mental health situation that women are feeling after abortion. But we know now 60% of the women say here in Canada they were pressured for one reason or another into abortion. So what are we doing to these women? What are we doing to their mental health? And in the study, Dr. Reardon, I don't think he highlighted this, but I just wanted to do it for you today. 40% of the women who experienced delayed negative reactions from their abortion, 15% were still experiencing it 20 years later. So this is for this quick, easy fix, right? And we think this is so important. This is such an important information for women to know, but nobody else seems to. Certainly Pam Damoff, who 2021, she's an MP, and she stood up in Parliament and said that we were spreading misinformation and disinformation. Actually mentioned Alliance for Life Ontario, so we're forever in Hansard as being misinformers and disinformers. And what's so annoying is she's protected. She can say that in Parliament. But if she said it out of Parliament, we'd have had her in court. But she would not. She wouldn't respond to anything that I sent to her. But this, you know, this language of over the top, I love it. But that is what happens to you. If you stand out, if you just make something that just niggles somebody. And I did mention this morning that the Action Canada actually have a piece on their website that tells everybody to complain about the abortionpillreversal.ca website. Because they say once again that we're spreading misinformation, and that's a government, as I say, massively government-funded piece. And when you look at what we run on, and you think, yay, it's great to be able to cause trouble a little. But for these dear women, I wish we could do something. And then this other piece, and that's another sort of area I'm following with some of the materials or some of the messaging we're going to put out, is this idea of women shouting out their abortion. Well, they're the minority. What about the 60% that can't shout out their abortion? So again, we started to try and put a few numbers together to just show, and I mentioned a little this morning about how difficult it is to get any type of picture in Canada about numbers. So we put this together, this pick a number document. There are a few left on the table, to sort of say, well, look, there are statistics here and statistics here, and National says this and Ontario says that. Like, where does a person go for any type of numbers? So I know this is a bit little, but I've got it larger in a moment. So what I did in February, we wrote to the Ministry of Health in Ontario, and I actually called first and asked if I want to know how many myfogemiso procedures there could be in Ontario, how would I find out? So they said prescription claims, right? So what I did was I put a request in for the prescription claims for those years. So if we can start from that line that says, from the start of the program on August the 10th, 2017 to December 31st, 2020, the ministry received 45,363 prescription claims for myfogemiso from participating pharmacies in Ontario. What that means is the doctor had prescribed it, the woman received it, she took it in, the pharmacy dispensed it, and then she took it. So these are the figures when you look at the fiscal year, and they do, you have to juggle if we want to compare to the national figures. National, they just do January to December. The Ontario Ministry of Health do April the 1st till March the 31st. So there's a bit of juggling that we need to do to compare, but nevertheless. So 2017 to 18, 3,783. Next year, 11,690. Next year, 15,538. And this was only a partial year for 2020-21 because I'd only asked in February. And they'd got 14,352 at that point. So that's just a bigger piece of that, but I wanted you to see that it was actually from the Ministry of Health that gave us those numbers. So then we did another one just this year, asking for the last 2 years. And so these are the figures that we received. 22,658, and then 28,524 for the latest year completed. And I just would, if you look where he says sincerely, just above there, I'd asked a question about to help David do our second study, if we can save enough money up to do it, and how you connect maternal death certificates to pregnancy outcomes. And the answer to that was to talk to these. Well, I haven't had much luck currently, but the discussion is ongoing. So if you look at the years since we've had it available here in Ontario, we're looking at 90,000 abortions, medical abortions in those few years, just in our own province. And then this is what I talked to you about this morning, didn't show you. So these are supposedly the Canadian numbers. So surgical is the top line, which they say is 60.5%. Medical is the second line, 38.448. So that's 39.5. And yet and I did do the change, I did do the comparison so that we could compare, and I mentioned that this morning. So how is it that in Ontario, our rate actually translates to 67% medical abortions in our province, and that of the whole of the country, we have got 27,567 out of 38,448. How is it? It's really not possible. It's not possible. So here you have now this idea that there's a whole reversal that can be made available to women. And so again, there's a lot of work that we have put together to try and make that information available. And it is such a simple thing. I mean, if there are any doctors among you, it just is. So the pill takes all the progesterone out, so hey, what do? Well, we'll put all the progesterone back again. And the studies are showing that that's 64 to 68% success rate in women. We now have an animal study from last year that in rats, that gave a percentage of 81% of the little rats that were given mifepristone and then given progesterone, brought their babies to term safely. So we now have an animal model as well. When I presented that to the Guelph City Council, the assistant solicitor turned around to me and said, "We're not rats." And I sort of thought, don't know, really? Anyway, then my Christian hat sort of kicked up, but it is amazing. And I mean, and in that discussion, all we've done is had 2 ads on the buses that we wanted them to have that just said that medical abortion has 4 times the rate of the most serious adverse events. That's all it is. They don't believe it. They don't believe it. They say it's misinformation and disinformation. So our website also has garnered a couple of complaints, and although Joyce Arthur from the Abortion Rights Coalition says she didn't do it, I don't know. But what they were saying is that we were pushing a drug. So they complained to Health Canada and said, that these people are pushing a drug. And how God works. Health Canada said, no, they're just referring a procedure. And I thought, amazing. So they knew the truth. But what is really annoying to me is that you have the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada. Sorry, it's late. And this is our question. Is it a profession bought and paid for by Big Pharma? Is it? Because, and on the table, I didn't bring all my notes because I've been longer, but I have Guideline 398 from the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada, which says, not verbatim, but to prevent miscarriage or preterm birth, progesterone, bioidentical progesterone. Progesterone has been used for 50 years, one way or another. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. There's this, ongoing discussion about different ways to use these certain, Jakki, no, not drug. It is a drug, I suppose, but it's a natural one. And so, that's how they've developed things. And yet, the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada call abortion pill reversal dangerous, and they don't support it. Now, why, when they use progesterone in so many other things, including in their guideline, and the Canadian Drugs Directorate also says it's good, it's helpful. So why can't women who have made a mistake by taking that first pill, why can't they have a second chance at choice? The other argument is that it's off-label use of progesterone. Well, until we had mifegomiso, they had what they love to call the M&M abortion, which was methotrexate and misoprostol. Methotrexate is a drug they use for cancer to stop proliferation of cells. That was used off-label to kill the child, but that's okay. But you can't use an off-label use of progesterone to save a child's life at the mother's request. Makes no sense. And of course we do know that our government is at war against our mothers, because I just totally think they are. They're trying to close down the very, very places that women are saying they need. Pregnancy help, pregnancy support, walk me through it, help me bring my baby to term. In our city we opened a pregnancy home, we have a pregnancy support group running out of our office, as well as our educational pro-life. But what does our government do? It wants to take the very thing women are saying they need away. And I put this in because it just amazes me. This is, when we invest in children, we invest in a brighter future, says our Prime Minister. And yet we have a Criminal Code 223 that says children in the womb are not human beings. Really? Like, really? And then I love this, and it's on one of our cards. This is from 1972, and it's Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau in discussions about abortion. And this woman had wanted him to go a lot further or something, and he just said to her, but the fetus is not your body, it's somebody else's body. And yet his son has said, we will support a woman's right to choose. We will over her own body and all these things. So he's not listening to his father, obviously. And then we do have, there is a lethal legacy of the Supreme Court decision in January 28th, 1988. Canada almost, well, they started to abandon their children in 1969 with the abortion law. And in 1988, they completed the abandonment of not only their children, but the mothers as well. And that's why we're facing what we're facing. Totally facing. So these little people, he's just a couple of days old. And you look at that and you think, literally, a few days before, he could have been killed. The latest, the oldest little one that I have ever fought for and lost was 34 weeks. And because they couldn't find anybody here to kill, they paid for the mother and father to go to a late-term abortionist in Texas. You know, that's the callousness that we have toward human life. But, you know what, we can do it, right? We must continue to have the courage to stay true and committed to bringing about what seems to be an impossible dream. And you remember the guy at the beginning pushing that rock? There's a story about that that most of you have probably heard, but I'm going to give it just to close. And I'm 2 minutes late, I'm sorry. But there was a man who lived in the forest, and he worked every day, and one day God came down and he said, I have a job for you. You see that rock at the back of the garden? I need you to push it. And he said, yeah, sure, Lord, I'll do that, no worries. So every day he got up and he did his work, and then he pushed against that rock as God had asked him to do. And he continued to do that for a long time. And then, of course, the devil sees him and he drops down beside him and he said, you moved that? Is that moved at all? He said, well, God told me to push against it. He said, but has it moved? And when the man went in that night, you know, that sort of niggled him a little. That, well, why would God ask me to do that? And I've been doing it for like 30 years and it's still there. And so he began to doubt. So he went out the next day and he didn't push quite as hard. And he went out the next day and didn't push quite as hard. And God came down and he said, I noticed that you're not pushing as hard as you were. And he said, well, you know, God, I've been out here every day for 30 days pushing this rock, and it hasn't moved. And God said to him, look at yourself. You are such a thin, measly little thing. Look at your muscles. Look at your staying power. You've done what I asked. I didn't ask you to move it. I asked you to push against it. When it's time for it to be moved, I will do it. And I think that's a story for us to remember. We fight and fight with all our might. We push back all of the time, whether we are successful or whether we're not, because we have to have a voice. And some of us may risk going to jail. My big problem with that is I'm not sure they'll let me wear my makeup. But what can I say? It's not what I want, but quite honestly, now I'm prepared. I'm prepared to do it. I'm prepared. If they're telling you that speaking out means that you are going to go to jail, then for God and the babies and their mothers, I will go to jail. And the people that they are killing at the end of life. So let's just, you know, he can pull all them up. He can do it, you know that. I'll get the next slide out next year. He'll have got them all up there. So just hang in, keep fighting. It's worth it. It is so, so worth it. And we're such a great family, and it's been wonderful to pull in much more the fight at the end of life today. It's been huge. So bless your hearts, and I know you're all tired, but this has been wonderful, and we thank you. I think even my president's texted his wife to say if she doesn't shut up, I'll never get home. Anyway.
Thank you, Jakki. Thank you.
Oh, no. That's fine.